So Dan, what do you want to call this show?
I don't know. I feel like I'm getting poked, so poke the gorilla.
Oh yeah, you're the gorilla.
Yeah, I'm the gorilla. Yeah. Hey, Sean.
Hey Dan.
How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent.
Good.
Hey, you talk about things that aggravate me.
Yeah.
Things that aggravate me.
I'd say things.
This
that aggravate
doesn't
us.
so much aggravate me, but it's more of an observation.
Okay.
And what I've noticed is, of course, I'm watching my family grow. You're watching your family grow.
Yeah, sure.
And I think back to when I was a kid, and even before then, how families were so different. In other words, at the time, the nuclear family was a mom, a dad. The mom stayed home with the kids. Dad went to work, sort of like that Ozzie and Harriet kind of thing, you know?
Sure.
And I wonder whether or not back then wasn't a better scenario than it is now. So what I started doing is I started thinking about it, and I started looking into it. And I think one of the reasons that mom had to go to work is because there's more stuff to buy now. Or actually over the last roughly 30, 35 years. There's just more stuff to buy. Like back in the 60s or early 60s, a small percentage of families had more than one car. A small percentage of families had more than one TV. Nobody had air conditioning. So what happened was, as products came into our society that were able to be purchased, there was a need for more money to buy the great stuff that people wanted. So what happened was the mom had to start going to work. They had to start generating more income so they could buy more stuff. And that to me is a little bit of a concern. However, it goes to our standard of living. Our standard of living has improved. So there's a big piece of me that wishes we could go back to Ozzie and Harriet. But there's also a practical side of me that says practically impossible, because I'll tell you what, we're a bunch of selfish pieces of crap. No, we really are. We're selfish. Think about it. Okay?
Sure.
In the
No,
40s,
I don't disagree with that. Yeah, we
when
tend to be selfish creatures.
the people, when a lot of our veterans came back from the war, okay, they went through a lot of nonsense. Before they went to the war, they went through a depression.
Sure.
So now they come back, they look at their kids and they say, I don't want my kids to go through what I went through. So what they do is they focus on these kids. My generation. Okay? So now what happens is when my generation starts having kids, it's real difficult to take that spotlight off us and put it on our own children. Again, it fosters that selfishness. However, I think that is a function of the direction we've gone in terms of families being broken up. Because I think a big problem is the breakdown of the nuclear family. And you've got more and more kids being born with single parent households. Some women will have kids from like 4 or 5 different men. That's extreme. I get that. But, and the government, in my estimation, watch this, folks. Government, in my estimation, is largely responsible for people taking that stance because they have a safety net with the government, so they can have more than one kid without being in a committed relationship or a marriage.
Okay, well, that's an interesting stance to take.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously in the next generation up from you, so I'm more of the product. I'm same age as your kids, give or take a few years. So, and what I've seen in my generation is not that phenomenon playing out as you describe. I see it more as yes. I think the way you describe my generation is, and then I've actually read demographic accounts to say that a lot of people believe that's true, but then what you've seen is, from my generation, is a little bit more of a helicopter parenting type situation, where people are overprotective of their kids because they're having less kids, right? But I don't disagree with you that I think the nuclear family, the fact that the nuclear family is a little bit less common is a bit of a disadvantage, let's say. Right. Obviously there are circumstances.
We agree on that. That's for
sure.
Well,
I mean, obviously there are circumstances where you just can't. You can't avoid it. Maybe somebody passes away.
Yeah.
Things
There's
like
scenarios.
that. I mean, obviously, or other scenarios, unplanned scenarios. But you do see more and more kind of standard setups of split households and things along those lines, which further distresses people's resource usage, right? Mm-hmm. Because as you said, I think we can all agree we had this trajectory where. At one point, one person in a nuclear family could go out and support the family, and then we had women's rights movements. Women wanted equal rights, equal opportunities, but I think that was also driven by necessity a bit, because we had situations where cost of living was going up, and there was anxiety. There was anxiety around not having enough. So what happened Whereas one point we had, one person of the family, mostly the mother, would stay home and be the domestic lead, and the father would be the main breadwinner. Now when we had a situation where, women felt they needed to go back to the workforce, leaving less attention given to the household. Not to say that there aren't plenty of
And
people
less attention given to the kids.
well, that's what the kids kind of I encompass in the household, and if you really look at that, and I disagree. I disagree that the government is to blame here, because I think human psychology is to blame. Like we said before, greed is a motivator, and greed doesn't have to necessarily be this malevolent thing, but this desire to have more and get more, I think, is almost a natural human motivation.
It's a natural motivation, Sean, if it's available, and I agree with that. I understand that. But when you think about the people, let's face it, incredible amount of kids are born out of wedlock. And I don't mean just wedlock in terms of standing in front of a judge or a priest. I'm talking about committed relationships. And by the way, let me fill something in for you. The one thing I do think has been a positive is the fact that gay marriage is becoming more and more acceptable. And I'll tell you why I think that's a good thing. Again, surprise.
We can agree on that.
Is because you got a lot of kids in the world, not necessarily just in the U.S., but you got a lot of kids in the world that wouldn't have a household if there weren't the availability of these people of gay people, gay families, to adopt these kids. And I think that's hugely beneficial to this country and to this world in general. So the general acceptance of gay relationships, I think, is a positive. That's one change I see going forward that I think was a good one. But going back to the mother going out, and let's face it, look, the fact of the matter is, you're right. We're greedy. If there's something to be bought, we bought it. But remember something, when mothers started to go to work, it wasn't necessarily to buy new stuff. It was because they were trying to protect against losing the first income.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, the first
I can
income,
agree with that, yeah.
the second income ain't all that beneficial, because you're adding, granted, but it becomes more burdensome in terms of taxes. It's not as lucrative as the first job, or it would be the first job. So it doesn't make any sense to me. So again, from a pragmatic standpoint, look, it's obvious why things went in the direction they go.
Sure.
Or they're going.
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
I understand that. But if government would step up and make families more responsible for themselves, rather than apply social programs to people and dropping kids and being not benefited, but they can survive and they have that safety net. If government would step out, there would be a demotivation to letting these kids grow up without fathers, without mothers, whatever the case may be. I just think that's a huge mistake. And it seems like everything the government touches, they turn to crap anyway. We've had that discussion.
We have. And
Yeah.
of course, I pretty vehemently disagree with all your points right there. First of all, as I said, I think human motivation drives us to want more, right? And if you really look at, the circumstances that surround, both parents having to go to work, or deciding to go to work, let's say, one of the key deciders in here is we as a society, as a culture, have devalued the role that traditionally women have played in the household. We devalue domestic leadership. We devalue raising children. Mm-hmm. We devalue, to some degree, education, but that's another talk. But it all kind of wraps into one here. Mm-hmm. And the question is, you talk to the average person, and they don't believe that those aren't valuable things, but that's not reflected in the compensation, let's call it, for lack of a better word, mm-hmm. or the reward of doing those things, right? So hence, now that person that used to do that now goes out into the workforce, right? Leaving, for all intents and purposes, those important jobs as part-time jobs, because they're just not valuable from a monetary standpoint. So the question is how do we get? And I believe that has nothing to do with government. That has to do with the desire for people to achieve more. And if anything, you could say, well, the government, incentivizes capitalistic motivations, which would then drive people.
Government doesn't. I disagree 100%. They don't capitalize. They don't.
They participate in it.
They don't promote capitalism attitudes. Not at all. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. They promote socialist attitudes. And let me make one more point. Okay. Remember what I said earlier, and it's absolutely. I mean, you can check it out if you want. I've got websites you can check. The second income
And
isn't all
remember,
that.
everybody, the internet is always right.
No. No. You can check it out and make your own assumptions. I mean, make your own judgments. The fact is that second incomes are heavily taxed, or more heavily taxed than the first income. So, why are we taxed? Because the government needs our money.
Right.
So, if you have smaller
police
government,
and military,
you're going to
are
have
important.
less. If you got smaller government, and especially social programs, which are better than 50% of our budget, if you had smaller social programs, which means we need more or less taxes, that income would be more beneficial. It would be more valuable to the individual household.
Well, I mean, for the people that are able to benefit from that, but what about the people?
Anybody
don't
that
benefit?
works can benefit from that.
Oh, yeah. Well, so what if two people are working at Walmart, and
Yeah.
making,
$15 an hour now.
Yeah, well, or let's go somewhere where they're not-
That was voluntary, by the way.
Okay, all right. But
Hey,
again,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no,
Make one more point.
No, I was going to say, again, there are certainly still jobs where you get less than that. If you have two people working that, or if you're having a situation where you can't afford daycare, one person has to try to survive on a $15 an hour job, then I see this argument is breaking down.
Go to school. Get an education.
That's another.
We're gonna
that's
talk about
another
that next time.
one, but,
Hey, what do you want to do? You want a muffin?
yeah, sure.
All right, come on, let's go get a muffin.
Sounds good.